Matt Mercer and Brennan Mulligan reveal even more details about Campaign 4 as they answer your burning questions.
Answer me!
Before we dive into what Critical Role's current and former DMs have to say, why not take a second to hit those like and subscribe buttons? And then, let's talk some Critical Role Campaign 4. Matt Mercer and Brennan Mulligan sat down for a fireside chat where they answered some of your huge questions about Campaign 4. So let's dive right into what they had to say about this new adventure, starting with that West Marches style. Brennan did a much deeper dive on just how West Marches' campaign will be, and confirmed some of the details about how the different parties will work under his system. First off, he talked about the narrative style of the campaign, and how that while the three parties would all be doing their own thing and having their own adventure, there would be one overarching narrative that linked all of them together, comparing this to the structure of some of the best fantasy novels. So think of it very much like a Game of Thrones or the Wheel of Time series, where you may have a few different POV characters you bounce back and forth from between chapters. Or in this case, they would be the parties. But there is one big narrative above all of them that will eventually tie them all back together. For Wheel of Time fans, you'll have a Rand chapter, and then a Matt chapter, and then maybe even a boring-ass Perrin chapter. But you know that at some point they're all going to meet back up and working towards one shared goal. But he did confirm that like a true West Marches campaign, a lot of the specifics would be decided off the actions of the characters versus railroading them along a narrative linear campaign that he's constructed. Matt and Brennan also confirmed that players would be meeting back up with each other and the other parties, and that parties themselves would be swapping members and changing as the campaign evolved over time, so you will get to see your favorite cast members play with all the other cast members, we're pretty sure. Brennan and Matt also both mentioned that the West Marches style will allow for much more fun, challenging, and balanced combat, which has been a major problem that Critical Role's faced. With both DMs having spent years trying to balance combats for 7 or more players, and knowing how that's an almost impossible ask, because all those encounters tend to be either far too easy or far too hard, and they both agreed that one of the huge perks of splitting into groups of 4 or 5 is that it's suddenly much simpler to build a combat encounter that can legitimately challenge a party of 4 or 5 without being a cakewalk or a death sentence the way that a party of 7 would be. And so we should expect some much more interesting encounters and combats when it's time for the parties to tackle their enemies. And speaking of that, when asked how they go about making a big bad, Brennan stated that in keeping with that West Marches style, he won't actually be creating a single big bad. Instead, he will be creating many bads across the various aspects of the game. Corrupt politicians, ambitious warlords, scheming wizards, etc. He will allow the actions of the players to decide how big each of those bads becomes over the course of the campaign. So basically, he will be planting the seeds for dozens of big bads, and just seeing which of them get the attention from the various parties they need to grow into a truly big bad for the campaign. We also got the answer to a question fans have had since the end of Campaign 3, and that is, how does divine magic work in a world without gods? While Matt sort of ignored that aspect of the ending of Belzhel's journey and seemingly allowed it to still sort of work somehow without a ton of explanation, mainly just to tie up loose ends in their campaign, but Brennan is clearly taking a much stricter approach, saying that other powers have simply rushed in to fill that void, as the gods are very much dead and their influence is gone. Druids have seen a huge rise in power as their veneration of nature survived the death of the gods, and suddenly they're one of the go-to sources of healing magic and answers that the clerics used to hold. Warlocks are also suddenly hugely more important because of their connection to other sources of magic. But the coolest part might be that clerics are not completely gone, but now they're just sort of like these wandering bands stuck trying to find a way to make a divine pact with the domains themselves instead of the gods that ruled those domains. And it sounds like they are not having much success just yet. But now let's get into maybe the most shocking reveal of this fireside chat, in which it becomes clear that the dominant race or species of Araman isn't humans, or elves, or dwarves. Instead, it might be the Orcs. Brennan implied that it was the Orcs who led the charge to overthrow the gods, and made it very clear that this was his chance to make his dream of Orcs actually being the heroes of their own story, instead of the villain of someone else's story, come true. Let's take a listen.
You have this idea of the
orcs and their relationship to like a Sauron figure in Middle Earth. And the thing I always felt when I look back at that myself is you go like, well, the orcs are Sauron's greatest victims. They have been taken by this evil force and made captive. And so the idea of what if the orcs figured out a way to say, fuck that? What if instead of hobbits figuring it out, it was orcs figuring it out? Specifically, a vision of a proud orcish revolution. And that's really what occupied my mind in dealing with the history and ramifications of that.
From what Brennan is saying, it sounds like orcs will be front and center as the dominant species of Araman, the ones with the most political power, and the leaders of the mortals that rose up and killed the gods. It's a huge change from most fantasy settings, but Brennan has made it clear that he loves the idea of orcs getting their day in the sun. And so we would expect to see a lot of orc player characters and NPCs in the campaign as he finally gets to live out the dream he's had for orcs since reading Tolkien as a child. So what do you think? Are you ready for this orc-centric campaign 4 to kick off? Let us know down in the comments, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.